sometime in our session with Cara. So you guys can all have a seat and get ready for the session with Cara. Just a very, very quick intro. Cara is a performer, a teacher, an adjudicator, a clinician. She's worked with us, you may remember, last January, long time ago, still in 2020. She came to St. John's on a Saturday where she's actually the artist in residence at St. John the Evangelist Church. She's part of the choir there, and she worked with us there in January. She also did a concert with us when we did the Chilcot Requiem in March of 2018. She sang the soprano solo for that. She's, I think, are you, Cara, if you have your mute off there?
I do.
Good. Are you still the president of the NATS, National Association of Teachers of Singing for National Capital Region?
I certainly am. In fact, we just had our re-election, and I'm so excited to be the president yet again. I think it's one of those jobs that, you know, not everybody really is you know, kicking down the door to have, but I'm very happy to do it and to basically contribute in that way to the whole singing community and the singing teachers here. Right.
So Cara is also you're still a clinician, or you work with the Ottawa Regional Youth Choir?
That's correct. Yeah, I'm their vocal coach and performance specialist. And this year, with it being a little different, we're just trying to, as you guys are, trying to figure out what all that means. But yeah.
Right. And also, I think the most important thing actually is that right at the beginning of the pandemic, it was Cara that I saw the most of on Facebook as a sort of a positive force for singing and the ability for people to do Zoom. And she and you, Cara, and Grayson, your colleague, were doing Zoom rehearsals and Zoom workshops right at the beginning. And it was just so lovely to see that. So you're just a positive force.
So thanks, really Mark. Well, coming from you, that means a lot because you're one of the biggest positive forces in our community as well. So, wow.
There you go. So yeah, way to go.
Oh my gosh, I am so excited to be with you guys again. Every time I've had a chance to perform with you and to do workshops with you, I always come out, my heart always feels so warm and just so inspired. And so let's do it again tonight, basically. I would love to, since you guys are all on mute, no one can hear you. So give yourself permission right away to make whatever noise you want to make, or even noises you don't want to make, and take this opportunity to really open up and explore your voice in perhaps ways you've never explored it before. And that might mean you might make some dreadful noises, and it might mean that you're going to make some glorious noises as well. So as we go through different exercises, I encourage you all to be very generous with your breath and to sing out, not to the point where you're forcing yourself or anything like that, but feel like you're really giving everything you've got into everything, because you'll get more out of it that way. Okay, so let's start with a little bit of a breathing exercise just to start getting ourselves into our bodies. You guys are all sitting right now, so let's take a moment to just feel our sits bones sitting on our chair. I'm on an exercise ball, so I'm a bit bouncy, but if you guys are on just regular chairs, you can feel your sits bones, just the gravity of those, of them sitting into the chair. Feet flat on the floor if possible. And let's just take a moment just to breathe for a moment and just notice what you notice in your body. If you have any aches and pains, maybe you're going to notice those. Notice your thoughts as well. And as you breathe, notice the speed that your thoughts are going at. Are they going really quickly from your whole day? Or are you able to kind of get to a little bit more of a quiet place in your mind right now as you're breathing? Okay. So what we're going to start with first is experimenting with the focus or the slenderness or the width of our inhale, of our breath stream. So we're going to start with breathing in through a straw. So just start with breathing in through a straw and notice where the deepest part in your body you feel your breath is when you do that. Here we go. And breathe out. And this time after we breathe in with a straw, exhale on an F as in Frank. And again, be really generous with your breath as you're exhaling on that F. And try to get that breath out as quickly as possible. Let's try it. Breathing in through a straw first. And we're going to do it again. And this time, pay attention to where you feel breath pressure in your body. If it's an expanding pressure, if it's a contracting pressure, there's no right and wrong. We're just noticing what we notice. So breathing in through a straw again. Wonderful. Okay, so now if you're like me, I get very captivated as a singer with my body from about here to about here. And that tends to be the length of my singing body if I don't think about it too much. So let's do that again. And intentionally, can we, when we're exhaling on the F, really feel the breath pressure behind our front teeth as we're doing that F. Okay, let's try that. Breathing in through a straw again. Great. And for some of us, that will feel very familiar, and others maybe not so familiar. So again, notice what you notice. This time, I'm wondering if we can listen to the F or send the breath of the F into the body in a different way. So let's think of our sits bones, again, at the bottom of our pelvis. And what we're going to do is we're going to have the intention that we're giving the breath of the F to the sits bones and maybe letting it flow forward from there. Let's just give it a try and see what happens. Breathing in through a straw first. And I believe I worked with you guys a little bit on this in our last workshop in getting into something delicious. So think of chocolate or something that evokes like a mouth-watering taste to you. And again, we're going to exhale on that F, but feel like you're surrendering into like the deliciousness as you're doing it. So breathing in through a straw first. Wonderful. Okay. Now this time, pay attention to your feet. And I want you to imagine your toes are stretching out into the sand, into some warm, wonderful sand on the beach maybe, and that they go further and further, farther than your toes actually go. And as we exhale on that F, we're going to send our breath through our toes. Here we go. Very good. Okay, so you might wonder like, well, why are we doing this? What does this have to do with singing? And singing is really a whole body coordination. It's mind, body, voice, spirit. It's all of us all together coordinating. And the point of doing any of these breathing exercises is to know that we can choose to pay attention and focus in different spots of our body, or we can awaken different parts of our body. So I'm curious to see how this affects our singing. So we're just going to choose just a really easy exercise. It's similar to the last one that Mark was doing. We're just going to do just the arpeggio, maybe on ya. And let's start by breathing in through the straw. So it'll feel a little weird to do that. But then we're going to sing on the ya. And don't worry about where it is right now. Just sing for and notice what you notice. Here we go. Ya. Okay, great. And this time we're going to go back to our sits bones again. So thinking of the delicious chocolate or whatever. And I'm asking you guys to actually send your breath while you're singing that yaw through the pelvic floor there, okay? And mixing in with the chocolate. Here we go, breathing in through a straw again. Yaw. Wonderful. Okay. So now we're going to do the same thing with our toes, just like we did before. Breathing in through a straw. And you might already be noticing some slight differences. You might even be noticing some dramatic differences in your sound, and you might not be noticing anything at all. And that is all worthy and valuable information to be gathering as we're starting to explore our voice. But the whole point is that we are experimenting and that we aren't going with our go-to thing, like, okay, here's my music, I'm gonna learn my music and I'm gonna go and do exactly what I do every single time. Because you guys, and we're all on our own right now, to get new experiences and develop our voices and our minds as musicians, it's up to us to start thinking out of the box and doing things that are a little weird or a little strange for us, that gathers, it helps us gather different choices of what we want to do when we're singing, and we might even surprise ourselves that way. Okay, so let's all stand up if it's comfortable for you. Okay, and thinking of your feet again, just like have a thought right now about how long your feet are, okay? Feel how far your toes go forward. And also feel how your heel is a little bit behind your legs. It actually extends out a little bit behind you. Okay, and it gives us a great sense of balance on our feet, you know, thinking about the whole length of it, and that our weight is resting more over our ankles, not over our toes, not over our heels, but just over our ankles. And that we almost have like a platform on either side that kind of starts extending. And if you guys have seen Lord of the Rings with the hobbits, with those huge feet, I want you guys to imagine you've got hobbit feet, that they're huge, okay? And just feel how that feels on the floor and kind of breathe into that. Great, okay. So now with these big hobbit feet, let's sing the same thing again, breathing in through a straw. Here we go. Yeah. Excellent. So this time, can you feel like you're pushing your weight into your feet the whole time as you sing? Here we go. Breathing in. Yeah. And this time, let's feel like our weight is lifting off our feet. We're actually pulling away from the floor. Here we go. Yeah. Now I'm going to put myself on silent for a second, and I'd like you guys to toggle back and forth between feeling what it feels like to push your weight into the floor, and what it feels like to bring your feet out of the floor or let them lift away from the floor. And just notice what you notice, if it affects the coordination or the rest of your body's alignment, or even the tone of your voice. Let's give that a try for a moment. And I have a further question. Keep doing that for a second, but ask this question of yourself. Do you notice anything in your body that tightens when you do one of these things? Or do you notice any part of your body that releases when you do one of these things? Okay, great. I just want to see a show of hands. I'll go back and forth between the pages. So keep your hands up for a moment when I ask a question, because I want to just sort of go through it. Who felt a tightening in their torso when they were pushing into the floor? Great. There's a few of you here. Great. Okay. And who felt a tightening in the abdominals when they were lifting away from the floor? Aha, interesting. So as you can see, if you're on gallery view, but I think we're recommended that we're on speaker view right now, I will tell you there's a mix of the choir that is in both camps. I love this because we're all different puzzles and we all respond to different stimuli in different ways. And we might just take the exact same stimuli tomorrow and have a completely different reaction. And this is where the experimentation and exploration really comes into great effect, because you're getting to know yourself and your voice every single day afresh. So we're just doing that with just how we're using our feet. You could do that with, like, do you feel your shoulders like pushing down into your torso? Do you feel them lifting away from your torso? That's going to have a different effect. Do you feel your ribs opening? Do you feel your ribs closing? Are you pushing against the air out here? Are you pulling away from the air? You know, so you can start bringing your curiosity and creativity into the mix, and take things that don't seem to be about the singing, but see how your body reacts to this stimuli and how that affects your singing and how it affects then your whole coordination as we go about things. So in the same stream, I'm going to ask you guys to sit down again for a moment. So going back to the focus of the breath, the narrowness of our airstream, or the width of our airstream, I wanted to bring this up today because it really has a lot to do with how effective it is when we engage our breath. So if we think about it, our mouths are huge, right? Like if we think of like going, ah, there's a lot of space in there. And let's intentionally breathe in and try to fill our mouth with air as we breathe in. And we get a great sense of openness in our mouth when we do that. How far does your breath go down in your body though? Do you get a shallow breath or do you get a deep breath when you do that? Try that one more time just to ask that question. And I wouldn't be surprised if some of you actually get a deep breath when you do that. But I think for most of us, we're probably going to get a pretty shallow breath when we do that. So when we were breathing in through a straw, that is one of the best ways to remind our body how to breathe deeply and how to focus our airstream. So especially if we're thinking not of a big bubble tea straw, but like of a cocktail straw, right? That cocktail straw has great focus in it. We don't necessarily want to go around singing after we breathe through a straw, though it looks kind of silly. So it's of course better to have a more like neutral position and everything. And nasal breathing is a wonderful way to get a focused breath often. And let's experiment with this. Those of you who have a stuffed up nose and can't do nasal breathing right now, modify it and try these things through your mouth. Maybe thinking more of the ridge of the roof of your mouth being how you're going to focus your airstream, that you're going to breathe along the ridge of your mouth. But for the rest of us, let's take a moment just to think about how wide the bridge of our nose is. It's not wide at all. It's quite focused. So there's a natural focusing of the airstream right there, a narrowing of it. So let's take a nasal breath and just notice what we notice. How deep does your breath go in your body? Let's do one more of those. Great. And probably for a lot of us, it went a little deeper and it might have felt a little bit calming to take a nasal breath. Not all of us, but hopefully some of us experience something like that. I'm going to help us all out a little bit though. What we're going to do is we're going to plug our nose partially. Okay, so just not quite completely, but just give a little bit of a closure right here. And let's take the same nasal breath. Good, and breathe out. And if you've partially closed it, it'll take longer to fill up. And therefore the breath is also going to go deeper, right? Let's try that one more time. Excellent, and breathe out. So going back to Hymn of Freedom that we were just singing in our warm-up, we're going to just sing through the melody again, those first 16 bars, just on an ah, so you don't have to think about it too much. I'll sing it out and then you, oh, great. I'll mute myself then.
No, I was just giving you the note.
Thank you, Mark. You're even wonderful. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to sing it. You guys sing along with me and forgive me if I make a mistake. So we'll just sing it on an ah, but what we're going to do is we're going to partially plug our nose, if we can, and take that long nasal breath whenever we can. Here we go. Okay, I apologize to Mark. I breathed in a bad place in that one spot, but I bet the rest of you guys missed that. So if you notice when we're doing those long nasal breaths, we obviously sometimes don't have time for them. It takes us out of the rhythm and the tempo of the piece. But in practice, that's not always the worst thing in the world. In fact, I think it's really a very valuable exercise to see what it feels like to really truly take those deep nasal breaths in those spots and just teach our body that that's where we're inviting the breath. So this time without partially plugging our nose, we're still going to try to take that nasal breath whenever we can. I'm not going to take quite as much time between the phrases, but as you're finishing a phrase, see if you can already be looking forward to that next nasal breath. So think of like baked banana bread or I don't know, something like that you just love the smell of, okay? And that, so your nose is kind of awake and can't wait to take a breath of that lovely banana bread in. Okay, so here we go. I think you were in a, oh no, we are in C major. Sorry about that. Thank you. So 3. Okay, good, everyone. And there's no right and wrong. If you're struggling with the speed at which you can take that next nasal breath, you are normal. This is something that we have to practice, actually. It's not something that, for some of us, I guess if you have a really big nose, it might be a little easier to do it. And some of us just naturally have been doing it for years. So again, we're all different puzzles, but I encourage you guys to do some exercises where you're actually taking those nasal breaths. Okay, great. We're doing great with time right now. Okay, so we're going to go to the phrase before this. Oh, sorry, we're going to go to the very last phrase. That's where we'll be free. And we're going to sing that again and again and again in different ways. So, can I have a volunteer to pick a body part? Just take yourself off mute. And oh, Marga's saying ears. Wonderful. Okay. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to breathe into our ears. Even though we're taking a nasal breath, we're going to imagine we're breathing in through our ears. And then we're going to sing out our ears. Try to engage your breath out your ears and see what happens. So again, ah. So let's try that about 3 times in a row. And experiment with nasal breathing into your ears and with mouth breathing into your ears. And just see what happens. This might be the weirdest experiment in the world. Let's see what happens. Okay, so I definitely, when I was breathing in through my ears at first, I was quite confused because I'm like, well, how do I breathe in through my ears? Because the breath is really not going to come in through my ears. But it's more a sensation of inviting energy in and also engaging energy out. So investing or releasing. So again, when we were doing our breathing through our straw and exhaling on the F, that's exactly what we were doing. We were inviting and we were releasing. And all singing is movement. And this is something that if you can remember nothing else from this workshop, if that can be the one thing you remember, that all singing is movement, you know, that will, it's one of those foundational things to come back to again and again. And the question then is, as you're singing and you're practicing on your own, ask yourself, am I in motion? Or am I holding? Or am I holding something and something else is in motion? How much of me is in motion? All of these kinds of questions can start coming out of this realization that singing is movement. And in fact, life is movement, because we breathe in, we breathe out. We breathe in, we breathe out, from our birth to our death. And so life itself is that motion, and singing is an expression of that. So let's all stand up again. Okay, there we go. So let's try that same last little phrase of the piece right there. And I encourage you this time, if there's enough room, to just start moving around, you know, let yourself be silly. Imagine yourself as a little 5-year-old version of yourself, you know, just looking around the room and seeing things for the first time. Let's see what happens when we do that. So repeat it a few times in a row. Excellent. Okay, so we're going to take our hands. Everyone take a look at your hands for a second. Okay, so imagine that your hands, when you bring them towards you, you are inviting the breath. And when you push them out, you're releasing the breath. Okay, so for instance, if we're doing this phrase, we could do something like this. Let's try that a couple times and just see how that feels in our body.
We can't hear you.
Thank you. I think there's, yeah, anyway, I'm glad you can hear me now. So my arms are quite short. So when I go like this, I get to the end of my arms pretty quickly. So this time, let's actually like invite even more motion, that we're painting, like slathering paint on the wall. And we're releasing our breath as we do that. Here we go. Wonderful. Okay, so now we're going to go to the phrase before that, which is and together stands, or and together. Oh, yes, molds our destiny. And together molds our destiny. You guys don't need to know the words. It's just me in my mind that needs to know it at this moment. Let's go to an O vowel this time, okay? So this one sounds like and try to discipline yourself to stop there and repeat that phrase again and again and again. And each time you do this, why don't we pick a different part of our body to invite the breath into and to release it from? And just notice what you notice. Some of them will feel really free. Some of them will probably feel kind of yucky. Some of them will just feel nah, like nothing in particular, just sort of same old, same old. So just notice what you notice. Let's take a moment to do that. Great. Okay. So now we talked about the narrowness or the focus of the airstream on the way in, but we didn't really talk about it on the way out. So we can experiment with this. So we're having that narrow air focus on the way in. What happens if we also send our breath to a point? So say, for instance, you're breathing into your pelvic floor, okay, or your belly button. Think of like inviting your breath into your belly button, because it's it's a focus space right there. And if we engage our breath again through there, do we send it out wide or do we send it into a narrow point? Okay, let's try it both ways and just see what happens with both of them. So everybody's thinking about their belly button this time. Here we go. That's really interesting. I'm going to ask everyone to sit down again. I had a little discovery there that I was not expecting. So obviously there's no breath that comes into our belly button and no breath that goes out of our belly button, unless there's something anatomically wrong with us. But we do get a sensation of breath moving. And it's often a sense of breath pressure in the body and how we're engaging our breath pressure itself. When we inhale, we fill up our vocal tube, and the breath then goes into our lungs, and the lungs expand, the ribs open, our diaphragm lowers, and all of those little organs underneath the diaphragm all get squished. So we get a sensation that we can breathe way down into the depth of our pelvic floor, even though the breath is not technically going there. And as a singer, it's usually the breath pressure in our body that we really use to sing, because it's the pressure that opens our instrument from the inside. So the more engaged that breath pressure is, the more open and more resonant we can be. And so the more sound and the more rich and lush, we can get our tone. If we start to close up and collapse into a small vocal mechanism, we lose resonance and usually things start to get a little bit more difficult in the throat, and we get tired really fast, you know, so it's everything seems like a lot of work. So the idea of breathing in through a narrow airstream has a pitfall, like everything does in the human body, because we're always working in a coordination of the whole thing. So for some of you, when I say have a narrow airstream, that means that, oh, you're just going to take more of like a narrow stream of breath through your body kind of thing. So through your throat and everything like that. But for some of you, I bet it also meant, oh, okay, I have to close that airstream and make it narrow. And some of you are probably thinking, oh, I've got to use whatever muscles I need to use in order to get that focus. So we might be like squeezing here. We might be starting to kind of squeeze in the throat a little bit, or our tongue might be pulling back a little bit to narrow that airstream. And actually, physically, we don't really have to do any of that. And in fact, our job is for our instrument is to stay as open as possible. So let's take a moment just to breathe regularly through our nose or our mouth. So right away, naturally, your body is fairly open right there. In singing, we want to increase how open our structure can be. So if anyone's thought about the soft palate before, that soft palate is where it gets fleshy at the back of the throat. So you get your hard palate where you say your T's and D's, and then the roof of your mouth, and then way at the back, when you curl your tongue up to the roof of your mouth and it gets fleshy, that's your soft palate. But that's really just the beginning of your soft palate, and it happens about there. And then the soft palate actually stretches all the way back to where your uvula is. And that's that little thing that hangs down if you go to the doctor and say, ah, you see that little thing that hangs down there. So you want that to stretch back and down. And then behind that, the soft palate still actually has a little bit of an upward curve there. So we can get this feeling of a lot of space opening back there, which then opens up the back of our throat and allows us to get that deeper breath. So let's all just explore that for just a second. Imagine you've just learned you won $50 million. So naturally in your life, when you're surprised, you open. Also, if you're about to sneeze, you start to play with the breath at the soft palate. Achoo, you know, kind of thing. It's in that there that we get that little bit of a lift. And we also get it at the beginning of a yawn. Not the full yawn or the sneezing part itself, you know, kind of thing, because that's where it's closing up again. But just before the full yawn takes over, that's like that feeling of great openness back there. So going back to, I'm giving you guys a lot of information, I apologize, but I'm hoping you'll absorb it in different ways over the next week and the next few months. We want our structure to be like a bell and to be very, very open. But on the inside of that structure, we want a narrow airstream basically going on so we can get a lot of resonance as we're going along. So going back to this phrase, we're going to sing it a few times again. Before you start, just play around with like the beginning of a sneeze and kind of leave it there. And then start to really engage your breath the way we were doing a moment ago. So whether it's through your belly button, or if it's thinking through your forehead, or thinking through your feet. And then check in with yourself. Are you still open at the end of your phrase, or have you collapsed? Is that space still very open and the tongue relaxed? Let's give that a try. So if you guys want to keep sitting, you can, or if you want to stand up, you can stand up. And remember to use all your breath all the time. Engage all of it. Put it all out on the table and see what happens. Here we go again. Great. Okay. And whatever happened, notice what you notice. If you ever within this workshop, or when you're practicing on your own, if you ever notice you get a tickle in your throat, or if you start to get fatigued in your throat, listen to your body. Your body's giving you messages saying, hello. You know, maybe you could use your breath differently, or there's something you're doing with your voice that is not finding its optimal thing. So have a drink of water, take a little bit of a break. But usually when you feel a tickle in the throat, it usually means that you don't have enough space opened behind it, that your breath is kind of pressurizing directly underneath the vocal mechanism. So if you can start to guide that breath more on the back of your neck, so it's at the back of the vocal tube rather than right in the front. Think of eating and drinking here, and that you breathe and you sing at the back of your neck. That usually also encourages more openness as well, and that the soft palate then can really be played with the breath as well. Also, if you feel that fatigue, again, you never want to push yourself. Like, that's when you can hurt yourself, is when you're starting to feel fatigued and you keep trying to do something. So always listen to your body, because your body is giving you signals and messages all the time. Okay, so let's go to the phrase before that. So basically it's the whole second half of that first 16 bars. So and this will be really good to do this with, because if you're not open by the time you have that octave leap in the center of that, you're going to find it like more. So let's play around with this and just see what happens with this phrase. And try the same thing on an oo vowel. There's a big difference between ah and ooh, isn't there? Or it often feels that way. So ooh is very closed at the front of the mouth, ooh, which kind of pulls the breath into it. Anything that's strong in our body or tense in our body tends to be like the moth to the flame, or a beacon. The breath tends to engage where it feels something strong, because as humans, we're looking for something that we can grab onto to give us support or steadiness, you know, as we're singing. The actual true support and steadiness is in continuously being in motion. So anything in your body that gets muscularly strong, be suspicious of it. It is usually doing something that is trying to be helpful, but is actually being quite unhelpful in our singing. So how we say ooh, we can do it in different ways. So everybody say an ooh that's a very muscled ooh. Ooh. And you can feel like often a little bit of tightness in that lower lip when we do that. Ooh. What happens if we say, we put the tension more on our upper lip when we do that, and let our lower lip relax a little bit? Ooh, ooh, it should feel a little bit weird, almost a little sloppy feeling. Ooh, good. So right away, there's a little bit of a difference in the freedom of and the resonance that comes out when we try that. Let's try the same thing, but what we're going to do is we're going to engage our breath right behind our eyes, just above our ears. So we're going to kind of go, ooh, like, oh, wow. Like you just saw something really that you really like, or somebody you really like. Let's try that. Ooh. And that's more where we sing. That's in the vocal tube, and that is allowing the breath to move freely up and down the vocal tube. When it moves into the mouth, that's lost breath. There's nothing we can do with that breath, really. And obviously, there is always going to be some breath that leaves our body, but that's not the breath we're singing with. We're singing with the breath that is being pressurized and continuously engaged within our body. We're kind of recycling it, so to speak, okay? Think of a hose, right? If you put your thumb on the end of a hose, it pressurizes the water in it so the water flies further, right? If you're spraying from the hose. Same thing here. If we have a narrow vowel focus, a narrow airstream, we get more from it. We can release the breath in a little bit of a different way. So let's try the ooh all the way through this whole second half of the song, and keep sending your breath here, okay? And if you notice it's going here, that's okay. Just notice that it is going here, and then see if in the next phrase you can go again here. Just keep encouraging this, and don't beat yourself up if it's not going there yet. Let's give it a try. So from there's our note, ooh, take it away. Let's try it 2 more times. The first time, breathe just normally, the way you would normally breathe when you're singing. But the second time, if you normally breathe through your mouth, the second time, try breathing through your nose as much as you can, and vice versa. And I didn't give you quite enough time because I just looked at the clock and I'm already 10 minutes behind it. This is their question period. So I'm just going to open things up for any questions of anything that we've talked about so far today, or if you just want to say something that you noticed or discovered about your singing today that you didn't know before. Okay, wow, I must have answered every single question that you've ever had about singing. I'm sure that's true.
Cara, actually, I have one observation, and that is the huge space behind the back of the mouth. I don't think I ever got back that far, ever. So it's quite a cavern back there.
Congratulations, Deborah. I'm so happy you had that experience tonight.
Yes, that's
fantastic.
The new excavator.
Fantastic. I love that. I love that every single day when I sing, I discover something new. And I've been singing for a long time. And it's humbling, you know, in the idea that I'm capable of things I never thought possible each day. Sometimes they're not so good, those things, but you know, that's also part of the fun of it.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Carol Ann.
I noticed, well, I've always noticed this, but I wish I could breathe between phrases through my nose 99% of the time, because I get so much more air than I do with my mouth. And I find that my air in my mouth goes to about here. And when I breathe through my nose, I can literally feel it down, you know, further in my abdomen. So I mean, it's too hard to do that because you've got to close your mouth and breathe in through your nose and then open your mouth and get the sound to come out and so on and so forth. I just find
I'm so happy you brought this up, because there is actually a way that you can get it a little bit faster. So you can actually still have your mouth open and breathe through your nose. All we need to do is we need to bring the tongue gently up more to like an NG position. So everybody just say the word sung, sung, and leave your tongue there, and then try to breathe through your nose. So you can actually have a nasal breath with your mouth open, which takes a lot of the time out so that it's a little bit easier to get a nasal breath in between things. The other thing too is I don't always breathe nasally. I try to do it whenever possible because it does help me a lot. But if you can breathe through the top part of your mouth, think of like the center ridge along the roof of your mouth. Everybody put your fingers just in front of your ears. Go to a yawn position without breathing. And then think about starting your breath from here backwards. So that is that's as close to a nasal breath as we can get through our mouth. So it's like we're kind of playing along the fence, you know, kind of thing. Sometimes breathing from the nasal cavity, which is just a little on top of the palate, and sometimes breathing from just a little bit behind and below the palate. But basically we're playing with the soft palate in our inhales all the time. Some of you might find that it's you're very used to breathing on the bottom of your mouth with your lower jaw and like muscling that. And that's a very common thing. You're not alone if that's the case. And I would encourage you to see if you can experiment with breathing from different parts, along different parts of the mouth, and just compare and contrast. Like every day, kind of revisit the idea that you can breathe through your mouth or your nose or somewhere in between, that you don't have to do it the same way you've always done it. Any other questions?
We have a question from Céline, I think, or she's raised her hand at least.
Great. Where is Céline?
I'm over here. It is actually kind of echoed with Carol Ann. I've always kind of practiced the palate, the surprise kind of mouth inhale, either in preparation for a phrase or to start a piece or anything like that. And I just noticed today that I have never used nasal breathing once a song actually starts, unless it's like not our section singing and you're just kind of taking in some extra oxygen and, you know, chilling out in your section, waiting to come back in. So that was definitely something to explore, because you said to breathe through your nose, and I was like, I don't know how to do that without stopping. Wow. So yeah, it really echoed Carol Ann, because it's a useful thing to do. Thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome, Celine. I'm so happy that was a discovery for you too. And the interesting thing, I'll just quickly say too, is when we breathe through our mouth, often we're actually invoking the fight-flight mechanism, because we often will breathe through our mouth when we're shocked or we're like, you know, kind of thing, when we're scared. And so when we're singing, fight or flight is not necessarily the most helpful place to be in. It brings up a lot of anxiety sometimes. The nasal breathing opens up our connection into our vagus nerve, which is our parasympathetic nervous system, which is what we use when we sleep. And it's basically the innate wisdom that is continuously at work and at play within our own body that we don't have to do anything about. We can just trust it because we're still alive right now. It's doing its job. So when we breathe through our nose, it's often very calming. Mm-hmm. Other comments or questions?
I wonder if also breathing through the nose, you're more likely to get a dry throat.
Yes, okay. So when you breathe through your nose, there's actually so many little hairs and filters in there. So it warms up the breath. And when it warms up the breath, it conditions things. So it's a lot nicer and gentler to your whole vocal mechanism. When you breathe through your mouth, yes, it totally dries out your throat a lot quicker. Just something to notice, like, and so you might want to always make sure you've got a bottle of water with you or a glass of water when you're doing your practicing, and you know you're going to be breathing through your mouth a lot. But yeah, that's also a really interesting observation there too, Mark. Yeah, wonderful. Anyone else with oh, we've got a question down here, I think. Oh, the Wonder Woman. There we go. I don't know if you guys can see that okay. It's there's no light in my place here. Ah, there we go. It's Wonder Woman is over there. My best friend Eileen Sova, she's head of painting and drawing at OCAD University in Toronto. She painted that for me as a gift. And she did a whole series of iconic women from the 70s and 80s. And actually the original one that she painted is hanging in Chris Hadfield's living room. So I got a special one made for me. Thank you for the question. Any other questions?
Cara?
Yes.
A question about what makes less noise, breathing through your mouth or breathing through your nose. When we start a piece, I sometimes get disconcerted by recordings where you can hear the choir all of a sudden suck all the air out of the room.
Good question, Richard. I think everyone's a little bit unique when it comes to that. I would say that when you have your mouth open and you've got your tongue resting in that NG position, you've got a very good chance to have a very quiet nasal breath. There's hardly any sound, really, and you don't need a lot of breath. You just want it to go deep in the body, basically. It's usually that panic breath. That's really loud, especially when the breath is low in the mouth. If it's going along the lower jaw, it's going to be loud. You know, and you're using the muscles to suck the breath in. So that's when you get a very audible breath. Again, don't beat yourself up over it if you start noticing this week, oh my God, I'm a loud breather. It's just interesting information, and just start playing with it, you know, and it's not something you necessarily have to fix. It's just, again, it's something that is going on for you that particular day. And maybe that's a great jumping off place to go from and to have discoveries about yourself.
It's probably more disconcerting to hear the audience snoring.
Definitely, definitely.
Our audience never snores.
Excellent. I can't imagine them snoring. That would just be shocking, shocking. Any other questions? Okay, does everyone want to sing through Hymn to Freedom all the way through? Let's do it. I'll hand it over to you, Mark, and to you, Jetta.
Yeah, thank you very much, Cara. Awesome.
You're most welcome.
Lots to think about. Thank you very much.